Okay, I'm seeing some people join in now. We're just going to give this a few minutes while more people join in. If you can hear me already, please, in the right-hand side of this YouTube stream, just type in your first and last name and say hello. I guess I should also mention, if you don't see the chat, you can sign in on the top right-hand corner. So you just need to click on the sign in button on the top right-hand corner. Alright, so I'm seeing slowly people starting to come in. We're just going to give it a few more minutes before we actually begin. You can sign in to the chat in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Just click your little icon and click the sign in button. And then you should be able to start the chat. And once you have the chat open, please feel free to say hi, state your name, just so we can have a running attendance of who's here. And we'll be beginning shortly in about 2 minutes, just waiting for, see if anyone else will join in so we don't start ahead. Okay, so before we begin, I am seeing that there are about 3 people watching now. If you haven't already, could you use the chat feature on the right-hand side and just say hello and state your name just so we have a running record of who's here right now? Okay, looks like we have 4 people in here now. So once again, if you're just looking at this now or hearing this now, please in the chat on the right hand side. Looks like we have And one more time, if you're just signing in now, please on the right hand side using the chat feature, just say hello and state your name. Thank you. If you're already tuning in, just hang tight. We're waiting or hoping more people are going to join in just because it is this late in the afternoon, so there are some stragglers, but we're going to hang tight here. And again, if you are listening, if you could please just in the right hand side in the chat, just say hello, maybe state your name, and that would be helpful for us. Thank you. Seeing more people join in now. Once again, if you can hear me, please in the chat on the right hand side, give us your name, say hello, and as soon as we hear back from literally anybody, we will begin this webinar. Thank you. Climbing up to 6 people now. We'll begin this webinar shortly. Again, if you can hear me, just in the right hand side in the chat window, please say hello and state your name, and we'll know we can begin. There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you. All right. So I think with that, we'll be ready to begin. Hi, my name is Brandon, and welcome to the AirWatch webinar. We'll be going over the AirWatch product in the next hour or so. And I'm with the client service desk, and I have been with the client service desk for over 2 years now. If you're just tuning in now, we're going to go over some configurations we can make if the video quality you find is a little bit too low. Oops. So before we begin, I just want to state that this webinar is being recorded and will be available at the end of the webinar using the same YouTube link that you're using now. Keep in mind there is a 10-second delay between the time I'm saying a word and by the time you actually finally hear it coming out of your speakers. So if you're asking a question in the chat, it might be a little bit before I get to it, but I will try to get to it. And lastly, of course, feel free to ask questions in the chat, which is located on the right-hand side. And now, if you are finding that during the presentation the video quality seems to be a little bit low and the text is very hard to read, you can actually adjust the video quality settings by clicking the gear icon in the bottom right hand corner of this YouTube window. And what it'll do is it'll bring up a window where you can click quality, and in quality you'll have more options to choose from. You might want to choose something higher like 1080p, 720p. Those are the higher resolutions. That'll be easier on the eyes and it'll make the text easier to read. Mind you, it could slow things down too as well, but for the most part I'd recommend 1080p and 720p. And also on the left hand side next to the volume control is a live button. If you do not see a red dot next to the live button, it means you're probably falling a little bit back out of sync, so it might even add more of a delay if you're asking a question. So you can always ensure that you are on the live version, the most up-to-date version, I guess, by clicking the live button and ensuring that that red dot is there. So, what are the objectives for today? The objectives are to familiarize schools, you guys, with AirWatch and managing your iPads at your school. We intend to highlight the key benefits of AirWatch and how it'll help you. And as well, we're going to demonstrate how you can use AirWatch in your school environment. So we're going to go over some case examples of how you might go about managing your iPads with AirWatch. So AirWatch, what is it? Well, AirWatch is a mobile device management system, MDM, or enterprise mobility management system, EMM. Don't get caught up on the terminology. They both mean the exact same thing. So if you hear me throughout the webinar saying MDM or EMM, don't worry about what the difference is. There is no difference. They are exactly the same, and it can be referred to as either. So AirWatch is, like I said, a centralized environment for configuring and managing mobile devices. So it'll allow you to easily manage your mobile devices, or in our case, iPads, from a single web-based application, which should simplify the setup and management processes for new and existing iPads. Benefits. What are the benefits for the Toronto District School Board? The benefits for us with our iPads is that we'll have automatic TDSB wireless network access to WLAN TDSB 01. That is our corporate private network. No longer will we have to worry about typing in a username or password to log in to the Wi-Fi for our iPads. They will automatically join the wireless using a certificate to WLAN TDSB 01. So it should be pretty seamless. It's going to allow us easy app installation for multiple iPads. So if we have a certain suite of apps that we want pushed to all of our iPads or groups of our iPads, we can do that from one single easy location in AirWatch. It's also going to offer a consistent experience between our iPads. So our iPads will all have the same TDSB background when you're looking at the lock screen, and the background color is going to be a blue color, and it should be board wide. That's how they're all going to look. There's built-in security policies, which will prevent students from adding or removing apps, applying a passcode to the device, and then in turn locking the device or disabling the iPad as a result of not knowing what the passcode is. This is actually one of the #1 calls we get at the client service desk, is that a student will have put a passcode on the device. They don't tell the teacher what the passcode is, and then if you try to guess it, well, it disables the device, and you need to wipe it at that point. So AirWatch sort of prevents that from happening right out the gate. It also offers remote configuration and updates. And now I say remote, I mean wireless. So no longer will we have to connect our iPads to iTunes, or if you've had the pleasure of working with Configurator 2, you know that that's very complicated. This is all done from an easy single web page where it's all done over the wire. So all the not over the wire, over the air. All the configurations are done over Wi-Fi. So you don't have to cable it in, plug it into any computers. You don't require any certain software. It also removes the requirement for an Apple ID, so we won't have to remember our school's Apple ID anymore, or that Mobile G account that you're all familiar with. All the apps will not have to go through the App Store at all. They'll be going through AirWatch, so that's a plus as well. So, who can log in? Principals, by default, have access to log into the AirWatch console. And by extension, the principals can then add in an AirWatch administrator. AirWatch administrators are added in through LAS, or the Local Administration System, and that of course can be found on the desktop in your school folder, and the principal can go in there and add in an AirWatch administrator of their choosing. It could take anywhere from 12 to 24 hours before you as an administrator have access to the console. You should be notified via email, I believe, when you do get access to the console. And I guess I should also mention, for central departments that don't have LAS access, your manager can actually request it through the client service desk. So if there's somebody, if you're at a central location and you need access to AirWatch, send us a ticket, or rather just give us a call. So this demo will cover navigating the AirWatch console. We intend to show you the look and feel and the layout and how it all works, as well as organizing our iPads using smart groups. And smart groups is what AirWatch product refers to as logical ways of grouping your iPads, so that you can do things such as pushing an app to a whole suite of iPads as opposed to just one or two. And then we're going to go over adding and removing apps and web clips to the iPads using those smart groups. Before I actually get into using the AirWatch web console, I just want to quickly go over some of the things that have taken effect on the device side of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull up my iPad here on the screen. Bear with me one moment. And right now you should be able to see my iPad. So with AirWatch in play right now, all our iPads should look like this, and as I mentioned, they all get the same blue background, and at the lock screen they have the beautiful, lovely Toronto District School Board logo. There are a few things that are in place as a result of being an AirWatch iPad. One, you will see the presence of two apps, Agent being the AirWatch agent itself, that is the app that allows it to speak to AirWatch, and as well as the catalog. And you'll notice that maybe you do not see the App Store. And as I mentioned, this is by design. We wanted it so that the App Store is not readily available for anyone to pick up the iPad and start downloading apps. As well as when we go into settings, we can see now that the Wi-Fi is connected to WLAN TDSB01. And that wireless network requires no authentication. And this only takes place because it is enrolled into AirWatch. And also, there is no ability to set a passcode on this device in its current state. Now, that doesn't mean that any of this isn't possible. It's just it's disabled by default, so that you could consider the iPad in a sort of student mode right now. But let's say we want to go to the App Store. Let's say we want to put a passcode on the device. Let's say we want to change all this, or change some other things on the iPad. We can actually do that by going into the Agent app on the iPad. So when you launch the Agent app, it's actually going to ask you to log in with your username and password. And I'm just going to demonstrate this now. So I'm going to type in my employee number, and then for my password, I'm actually going to disconnect here just because I don't want you guys to see my password. I'm going to log into the AirWatch using my username and password. Bear with me here as I type in my incredibly long password. Okay, I'm just going to turn back on. So now you should see the iPad once again. So I've typed in my username and password. And what this does when I actually log into the agent is it will unravel some features that are disabled by default. And I can see that I got the success message. Now, the only ones who can log into this AirWatch agent are you, the staff. A student cannot use their student number and password to unlock the agent or log into the agent, which will then open up more features, and I'll show you. So now that I'm logged into the agent, when I go back to my apps, that app store all of a sudden is available. So you can consider after signing into the agent that it's more of in an administrative mode. I can also then go into my settings. Now the passcode feature is back, which obviously we didn't want students to set on, but if you do for a reason would like to set a passcode on the device, you can do that just by signing into the agent, unlocking that, and then turning on a passcode. As well as now iCloud is back as well. That was also something that was not there when it was locked. So if you ever find that there's something missing in what you're expecting on your iPad, it is probably because we locked it by default. And merely to get around that lock, all you have to do is go into the agent and sign in with your credentials. Now, let's say you're ready to hand it back to a student. You just need to log out of the agent. So when you open up the agent, you'll see there's a log out button right there. And when I click log out, it'll ask me if I'm sure. I hit yes. And I should be brought back to the screen asking me for my username and password. But what happens when we log out is now when I switch back to my iPad, that app store in due time should go away. I'm surprised it didn't go away already. There it goes. Now it's gone. So you can see just based off the network connection, it could take a little bit of time, but it does end up taking those away. So now the app store is gone. I now no longer have the ability to set a passcode on the device. iCloud is now disabled. So that's just to sort of give you guys an idea of what your iPad experience is like out the gate with AirWatch on it. Again, if you have noticed something's not there, just sign into the agent, and you shouldn't have any difficulties doing what you're used to. So consider that like an override. So, getting back to actual AirWatch, the console itself, we're going to talk about how logging in. So logging in can be done from anywhere on the web, not just within the TDSB. That is because AirWatch is actually on the internet. It's a cloud-based application. There is no browser limitation. You can use Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Safari. It doesn't matter. It should be okay to use with AirWatch. When you log in, you will be using your employee number and password. However, I did put a screenshot here of the username format to highlight that there is an important part of the username where you must type in TDSB / and then your employee number. And that part is necessary. If you don't type in TDSB / and then your employee number, it's going to say invalid credentials. So TDSB / employee number and then your current network password, and you're off to the races. Now, when you first log in, it will ask you to create a 4-digit PIN if this is the first time ever logging in. That only happens for the first time. And basically that 4-digit PIN is used for additional checks before you perform certain actions. So say, for example, if you wanted to wipe a device, before you wipe a device, it'll ask you to type in that 4-digit PIN so that you don't do something like that on accident. And of course, here is the link to AirWatch. It is cn239.awmdm.com. Obviously, that's a mouthful. I would recommend that when you do go to that page, maybe set a bookmark for yourself. I have included a link in the video description at the bottom, so feel free to click that if you wish to follow along as we're going through the webinar. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Now, if you're signing in for the first time, you may see the accept the terms of agreement. It's lengthy. Don't read it. Just click accept. And then you may be prompted to create your 4-digit PIN. And that 4-digit PIN, like I said earlier, is used for an additional check before you do certain actions, such as wiping a device. So with that, I'm going to switch over to my AirWatch console. If you're doing it right now, you can please go ahead and set your PIN up. But I'm not going to see that when I sign in because I've done that previously. So before I log in, for the username, I'm going to type in TDSB. Again, that is a very important part. Now, I will note that it's not case sensitive either. You can type in TDSB all capitals, TDSB lowercase. It doesn't matter as long as you have TDSB backslash, and the backslash being the one above the enter key, not directly to the left of the shift key, and then your employee number, and then your current network password. Then you can go ahead and click login, and you shouldn't have any problems logging in. So, once you've logged into the AirWatch console, if you don't see the prompt for the 4-digit PIN or accept the user agreement, probably because you've done it before, but the first page you should see upon logging into AirWatch after doing the 4-digit PIN is the dashboard, and that is under devices over here on the left-hand side. So I'm just going to show quickly, I'm going to highlight the 3 primary icons that we use for navigating here in AirWatch, and that is devices, apps and books, groups, and settings. And each one sort of refers to exactly what it's talking about. For devices, they're all under the devices section. For apps and books, they're all under apps and books. And your groups are all under groups. So it's kind of helpful in that sense. You can see which one's being used, and you can tell what it is that you're looking at that time. But starting off, we're going to go with the devices and dashboard because this will be the first page that you see. And the dashboard will give you a high-level overview of your school's AirWatch environment. It contains statistical information regarding your devices. So, for example, a couple of useful statistics. I can see here right at the top that my AirWatch environment has 3 iPads in it. So that's how many iPads are currently enrolled in AirWatch, how many are being managed by AirWatch. And then you can go into the individual statistics down here. As an example, let's look at no passcode. And it shows down here that 2 devices have no passcode. So what that means is 67% of my devices have no passcode. And it is reflected there in the chart. And all the graphs sort of play off that. So for not encrypted, last seen. Last seen would be another one actually that's important to highlight here, the last seen breakdown. This basically shows us when it is that the device last checked into AirWatch. So when was it last online? When was it last online and said hi to AirWatch so it knows it's alive? In this case, we can see that I have 2 of my devices that have last been seen in 0 to 3 days. And I also have 1 device that has been last seen in 4 to 7 days. Now the nature of the dashboard is actually, you can see when I hover my mouse over any of the graphics that it kind of changes to a darker color, and that basically tells you that these are all interactive. If I click any one of these statistics, what it will do is take me over to a list view of my iPads that particular statistic is referring to. So in the case of this example, last seen breakdown, I can see I have 2 devices that have last been seen in 0 to 3 days. If I want to see what are those 2 devices that it's referring to, I can actually click this bar here, and what it'll do is take me over to a list view of those 2 iPads it's referring to. And we can see what it did is it actually automatically brought up those 2 by applying a filter here that says last seen in 0 to 3 days, and those are the 2 iPads that statistic was referring to. So I'm just going to close out of filters here for a second, go back to the dashboard because we're going to touch more on list view in just after this. I just wanted to highlight one more down here. There is operating system breakdown. So for example, this one will show you that 2 of my devices are on 10.1, which would be the latest version of iOS. And I have 1 device here that is on 9.2. So here's a good use case scenario of the dashboard. If, for example, I wanted to see what devices are not on the latest version, I can see right here I have 1 device that's on 9.2. And maybe I want to identify that device. Maybe I want to update that device. How do I know what device that is? Well, I can just highlight that graphic. It'll take me over to the next page with that device. And then I can actually go ahead and force that device to apply an update. So that's sort of how the dashboard can benefit you as far as seeing a general overview of your environment and the sort of things you can take action on. So that's the dashboard. I already showed you the list view by clicking on that, but we're going to go in just to show you what will happen if we go over to list view without any filters. So list view is just underneath the dashboard here on the left hand side. If I click list view, what this is going to show is an entire list of my iPads in my AirWatch environment. Sometimes it can be a little bit slow, so we'll just wait this out. So what I see here is a breakdown of all the iPads in a list format for my environment. So right now I see that I have 3 iPads. The last seen field here shows that this device was last reported into AirWatch about 13 seconds ago. This one 4 minutes. So that just that's that value that we were seeing on the dashboard. And that just basically shows you when it was last online and communicating with AirWatch. For example, this red one here, it's flagged red because it's been 6 days. So that might give you a visual indicator that there's something going on with that. Also, we can see the friendly name, or in this case, this long one here, not so friendly. But this is the name in which you give it, that it appears in AirWatch, so that it's meaningful to you. We're going to demonstrate how to rename a device momentarily, and that'll sort of make more sense when it comes to creating smart groups so that you can deploy apps. You want the names to have a meaningful name to you so that when you're looking at it, it's not just iPad 3, 4, and then whatever that is. On this page, though, you can also see the model number, or model type, I guess rather I should say, of the iPad itself. Oops, sorry. Let me just go back there. I'll try not to click anything. You can see over here the model type of the iPad. So for this example, iPad 4th Gen 32GB black, and also it shows the iOS version number 10.1. There's also the field over here for enrolled, and enrolled shows me that that device is indeed in the AirWatch system. It is communicating with AirWatch, and you should have no problem with receiving any updates from AirWatch. Sometimes it might show unenrolled, and in the case where it would show unenrolled, that essentially means that you probably wiped the device and it's in the middle stage of having not been joined in. But they should all show enrolled. So that's list view. That sort of just gives us a breakdown of all our iPads in a list. If we want to actually perform any actions or take any action on a particular device, we can actually select the device, and that'll take us over to Details view. And when we're in Details view, it's focusing our actions on one particular device as opposed to a whole group. So now I'm in the Details view of this one particular iPad. And by default, it's going to take me to the Summary tab. And on the Summary tab, it's going to show me just some quick information regarding this device. For example, under Apps, it shows that I have 2 out of 2 installed. That 2 is basically any app that I've configured this iPad to have is reflected here. So in this case, there are 2 rules in my environment that say that this iPad needs to have those apps. And out of those 2, all 2 of them are installed. We're going to show how to add an app later, so that makes more sense as to why it's 2 out of 2. It also shows you the serial number over here on the right-hand side. You can see the serial number of your device. There is the storage capacity. So I can see I have 26 gigabytes free out of 27 gigabytes. And available OS updates. So if I have an operating system update that is pending, I can actually view it there, and I know that my iPad is due for an update. And then I can trigger the update on my iPad through this window, which I'll show shortly too. So that's the Summary tab when you're looking at an individual device. We're going to switch over to the Apps tab because that's another one that I believe is important to know. But this is going to show those 2 apps that it was referring to. It's going to show that those apps on this screen. It's going to give me the information regarding them, such as the name of the app. So for this example, we have the agent, which is mandatory, so all of the iPads should have the agent. Drive. So these are the 2 apps here that it was referring to. Shows me the version number of the apps, and as well as the app size. Now, these apps are here because I have some rules created to have them added to this iPad, and we're going to demo that not too long from now. But for now, these are the apps that I have already configured for this iPad, and I can see out of the 2, according to the status here, they're both installed fine. Now, there are some actions we can take on the iPad. So all the actions for an individual iPad can be handled up here at the top, where you see lock and more actions. Lock will essentially take the iPad and put it to its lock screen. So if you have a passcode, it would force the device to have a passcode, or it would rather take it from being open to the lock screen with the passcode. Otherwise, if you don't have a passcode, it just takes you to the home screen. So depending on whether or not you have a passcode, it might not be anything too useful. But if you do have a passcode, it's good for forcing the device back to its lock screen. Under More Actions, under here, we get this expanded menu. In all this expanded menu, there are some more things we can do. And the first one I want to highlight is in small lettering down here, Edit Device. Now, Edit Device is important because it will actually allow us to rename our iPad. So as you can see up here at the top, my iPad is called iPad 3,4-ECB blah blah blah. That doesn't mean anything to us. So it's very important that when the iPads first join AirWatch that we rename them. And we do that by going into More Actions and Edit Device. So I'm going to click Edit Device and we're going to show you just how we can get this name. When you are setting a name for an iPad, you want it to set it to something that is meaningful for you or your school environment. So as an example, let's say that this iPad is in the library and it is sitting on a cart that we've given cart 1. So we'll call it maybe something like Library iPad cart 1. And you can even go a step further if you want. Maybe it's labeled iPad number 2. So Library iPad maybe number 2. So this is the second Library iPad and it's in cart 1. So what's going to happen is that now when I click Save in my AirWatch environment, instead of that long name that doesn't really mean anything to me, I'm going to have it named to Library iPad 2 cart 1. So that way when I'm looking in my AirWatch environment, that actually means something to me as opposed to whatever the default was. There is an important flag to set here, and that is Set Friendly Name as Device Name. And if you check that off, what it'll do is it will push the name that we set here to the iPad. So just real quick, I'm going to switch over to the iPad just so you can see what I mean. So here's my iPad. When I go into Settings, and then General, and About, you can see here the name of the iPad is iPad. And that doesn't really mean much to us. So when we switch back to AirWatch, I'm going to rename it in AirWatch as Library iPad number 2, cart 1. And I'm also going to set the device name as Library iPad number 2, cart 1. And that'll take effect when I hit Save. So that should push over to the iPad shortly. Let me see if I can bring that back up here. And I go into Settings, General, and About. And just like that, it has now received the name change. So not only is it Library iPad number 2, cart 1 in AirWatch, but it also is named that on the device itself. So that might be helpful for you. Another action we can go over is Clear Passcode. So under Clear Passcode, under Device, what this will do is if you have a passcode set on the device, which again, as I illustrated at the beginning, is not enabled by default. You need to sign into the agent and then enable the passcode. If there is one, however, and you don't know what it is, somehow, let's say, for example, you handed the iPad back to a student, but you forgot to sign out of the agent, and they somehow managed to put a passcode on the device, you could clear the passcode from the device using this option right here. As of right now, again, the passcodes are disabled by default. If you wish to have the passcode set on all your devices, please let us know, send us a ticket or give us a call, and we will actually have that enabled for your school. And then in the future, what's going to happen is you should be able to do that yourself. But for now, passcodes are disabled by default. If you wish to enable it on maybe, let's say, 5 devices, you can just go into the agent, sign on, and then enable passcode that way. So that's Clear Passcode. I don't have a passcode on this device, so you just have to take my word for it that it does in fact clear the passcode. There is Device Wipe over here, and that's under Management. And Device Wipe, just as it implies, will actually wipe your device back to its vanilla settings. The Device Wipe will take it, wipe it completely. And why you may want to do that is, let's say you have an app and it's being troublesome, or maybe the iPad is loaded with photos and you don't want to spend all the time deleting them, and you just want to start fresh. You can do that. You can trigger that from AirWatch just by clicking the Device Wipe. But I will just show you, though, when you do the Device Wipe, and this is what I was referring to at the beginning, is it will actually ask you to type in that 4-digit PIN code here. So it asked me to enter my security PIN, and this is just so that I don't accidentally wipe the device. It's not something you would want to do accidentally. So it does ask you for that security PIN at that point. I'm not going to type it in because I want to keep my iPad for the remainder of this webinar, but if I typed in my PIN number at this point, what would happen is it would entirely wipe the device. There's also, under More Actions, iOS Update right here. So as I showed earlier, when we were on the Summary tab of this device, there was a section that showed available iOS updates. And chances are you want to be on the latest and greatest version of iOS. So if you want to trigger the update and force it to do it at a certain time, you can do so from here under More Actions and iOS Update. And that will essentially force the iPad to begin the update. It'll download it and start installing it at the moment you press that. And lastly, one more neat feature that I figure I should highlight here is Enable Loss Mode. Now, Enable Loss Mode is used in the event that an iPad is essentially unaccounted for. So let's say hypothetically you have an iPad that you haven't seen in a while. Maybe a teacher had put it away in their desk and totally forgot about it. What we can do is we can actually trigger this iPad into loss mode. And what that'll do, let me just click that and it'll bring up a menu here. It'll give me the option to set a message on the iPad so that the next person who picks it up, they know that this iPad is missing and it's unaccounted for. So I could say, this iPad hasn't been seen in a while. Please return to Mr. Silva. And I can even provide a phone number so that they can contact me. And when I click send, what it's going to do is put my iPad in a loss mode. And let me show you that. So this is what's going on my iPad right now. I can't do anything. I can't swipe the screen. I can't click the home button. Nothing. It's completely locked down because it's lost. And the message that I set there is right there in the middle of the screen with my number. And in order for me to begin using this iPad again, it needs to be considered disabled for lost iPad in AirWatch. So now that we've enabled it, I'm just going to go back here. And again, under More Actions, Enable Loss Mode. Oh, it still shows Enable Loss Mode. Sometimes this happens where it doesn't refresh the page. So what I can do is I can refresh the page. And then that Enable Loss Mode should actually switch to Disable Loss Mode. And that would be sort of like, let's say I got that iPad back and I'm ready to put it back into use. I can do that by going, again, More Actions, and now we see here, Disable Loss Mode. And when I click Disable Loss Mode, and switch back over to my iPad, it says right here, iPad located. The location of this iPad was sent to Toronto School Board. And now I can click Continue, and my iPad once again is usable. Oh, sorry, that's the camera. Just like that. So as far as device actions go, I think I've highlighted the most important ones that you will probably find yourself using. There are many more available. Some of them are not quite ready to go, but I just wanted to highlight those key areas of the actions you can perform on a device. So with that, we spent our time over here on devices. We looked at the dashboard. We saw the list of all our devices, and then we saw what we can see in details view in the console by looking at an individual device and all the different actions that we can perform on it. So now we're going to actually switch over to apps and books. Now, apps and books, as it implies, is going to be the location where all our apps are in our environment. So when we click apps and books, right away it'll take us to this page here. And there's going to be two tabs, Purchased and Web. Purchased is where our apps will go. Web is where our web clips can go. And our web clips are essentially bookmarks. They're little icons that look like an app on the screen of your iPad, but however, all they are is a shortcut to a link on a web page. But for now, let's keep our attention over here on Purchase, and this is where our apps are. When we first come in here, we see a list of apps, but these don't necessarily pertain to our environment. In order to see the apps that reflect our environment, we actually need to search for our school name using the search bar over here in the top right-hand corner. So you can either type in your school's 4-digit Trillium code. So for this one, it would be 9991, and I can hit enter. Oops, right there. And then we should see a list of our apps that are available for our school. You can also type in the school name. This particular school is called Test School. And I should actually see the exact same list because it's the same filter. So these are all the apps that are available for me in the AirWatch environment. And in the AirWatch environment, these are all the ones that I have submitted prior to with an app request form. This list should show all the apps that you've actually previously purchased. So prior to AirWatch, we had all our apps handled in our Apple IDs, the Mobile G accounts. They should have already been migrated over here into AirWatch. If you don't see a certain app that you've previously paid for, please let us know, and then we will log a ticket and get that investigated for you. As well as any free or new, any new or free paid apps, free or paid apps, I should say, will show up in AirWatch through the submission of the app request form. The app request form at this time usually takes about 24 to 72 hours before the app will appear in your AirWatch environment. And once it's in your AirWatch environment, you basically have the ability to then deploy it to your iPads. The app request form actually is right here. I'm just going to show you real quick. As of right now, you just fill out sort of your school name, email, principal. If it's a paid app, cost center, general ledger, the app title. And right now the form is actually limited to only 3 apps at a time. We will be changing this in the next coming weeks so that it will have an unlimited amount of apps. So this way, when you guys want before you begin with AirWatch, or as you're getting used to AirWatch, you can submit this form with a list of all the apps that it is you want in your AirWatch environment, and then we can do that in one go. But once you do submit the form, you will get an email notification telling you that it is in your AirWatch environment, and then you know at that point you can come in here and begin working with your AirWatch apps. If for whatever reason you received an email notification saying that your AirWatch app should be there or should appear there, and you don't see it, you can click this Sync Assets button up here. It's a little bit hidden because it doesn't really look like a button until you highlight over it. But if you click Sync Assets, what that'll do is it will force your AirWatch environment to check for any changes. We've seen this actually happen a lot where somebody had come in here, you would type in your school name over here in the search bar, you hit enter, and you don't see the app that you were expecting. Clicking the Sync Assets button, more often than not, will force that check, and then you will see it here. So that's an important thing to note. And as I stated earlier, that's the Purchase tab, so that's our apps. I know it says Purchase, but it actually applies to both free and paid apps. You'll see all the apps that are available for your AirWatch environment to be deployed here. But then there's also the web clips, and this is where we go in to create those shortcuts. I don't have anything here now. I'm actually going to demonstrate that later, how to add a web app, but just wanted to get you guys familiar with the interface right now, that we're on Purchase for apps and web for our web clips, and those are our bookmarks basically. You'll also notice that there is actually a books section here. Right now, schools don't have the ability to purchase books from the iBook store, but you can add your PDFs and EPUBs in there as well. But we're not going to cover that. So now we're going to look over here for groups and settings. And under groups and settings, this is where our smart groups are stored, and that's what I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. This is where we're going to logically organize our iPads into groups. So you would probably want to group your iPads based on where they are, or maybe they're in a certain cart, maybe they belong to grade 3s, grade 4s, grade 5s. However your school decides to group your iPads, this is where you're going to do it. It's under groups and settings. So what we're going to do is expand here, groups, and we're actually going to go down to assignment groups. Don't worry about what organization groups are. Essentially, they're just folders. But for our case, the smart groups are all located under assignment groups. So we click assignment groups, and we'll be greeted with a list of all our smart groups for our environment. So you can see here I have some by default: Test School, iPads all, Test School, Android all, Android testing. These are just some that are in our test environment. But we can see over here under the group type that it is a smart group. And these smart groups are what are used for organizing our our iPads into logical containers, which we can then push configurations or apps to them. You can also see actually here under the assignment groups, it shows you under devices how many it applies to right now. Right now I don't have any devices applied to these, but what I'm actually going to do right now is demonstrate adding a smart group. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the iPad that I have here with me into a smart group, and then we're going to add an app to it. So let's create a smart group. And we begin that by clicking the Add Smart Group button right up here at the top. Now when I click that, it's going to bring up this new window here for Create Smart Group. By default, it lands on this page here, which says Select Criteria right up here. We actually don't want to be in here when we're creating our smart group, because the way it works is it sort of goes, it applies to your devices based on rules. So for example, if I use the criteria, I could say this smart group will apply to all iPads that are on version 10. A little bit tricky, a little bit complex, and a little bit dynamic. So I think for the most part, schools won't be using that because they more apply to the device, but they don't really apply to our real-world scenarios. So disregard select criteria. What we're going to do to create our smart group is we're actually going to move over to select devices or users. And what this will do is it'll actually allow us to create a smart group by manually adding devices. So I can see here there's the devices, and this is where I would pull up my device list. But before we begin and start adding devices into our smart group, we have to give it a name. So going off our example previously, we had, I believe it was iPad number 2, and it was in the library. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to say that this smart group is going to contain our library iPads. So I'm going to give my name for the smart group as library iPads. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the device into my library iPads group. And I do that by first selecting into this field here. And what it'll do is it'll actually bring up a list of the iPads. In this case, I can see this is the iPad that I was referring to earlier, the library iPad number 2, cart 1. And this is sort of why I mentioned earlier that it's pretty important to name your device in a meaningful way. Because if you came here and then, you wanted to track iPad number 3, for example, and you didn't rename it, and this was iPad number 3, that serial number may not mean anything to you at first glance. So it's very important to name your devices in a way that's meaningful to you. So because I've done that, I can see that this is the one that I want to add. I will select it, and then I'll click Add. And what will happen is that I'll move over to the right-hand side. Once in the right-hand side, I know that it now belongs to the smart group. And what happens is when I click Save, it creates that new smart group, as seen here, Library iPads. And I can see it contains one device over here. So now I have my one iPad in a group for Library iPads. And now we're going to go ahead and push an app to that group, that Library iPads group. And how we'll do that is we'll switch over to Apps and Books over here on the left-hand side. Again, it's going to bring up a list of our apps. Or sorry, it's not going to bring up a list of our apps until we search for it. So always in the top right-hand corner here under Search List, type in your school name. And that will load a list of all the apps available for our school. So now we want to pick an app and we want to assign it to that group, which in then turn the iPad will get that app. So for this example, I'm just going to use, I don't know, we'll use Wonder for Dash and Dot robots. So how we assign this app to the smart group is we have to click this little button all the way over here on the right-hand side. So it kind of looks like a pen with a clipboard, and it says Edit Assignment. When we click that, it'll pop up in a new window, and this is where I would assign the app. I see somebody has already previously assigned it, so I'm just going to actually remove that real quick. Disregard that. But when you are looking at the edit assignment window after opening up an app, there is an important detail to note right here in the middle. Is it shows application enabled for device-based assignment. Please note that blah 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 blah. But essentially, what that means is that this app has already been flagged for device-based assignment. Now that probably doesn't mean anything to you, but I'll show you an example of an app that doesn't have device-based assignment. Let me just cancel out of that. And we have one here, Google Sheets. Again, I click Edit Assignment. And here's an example of one where instead of saying that, it says Enable Device Assignment. And that button is actually very important to press, because this button, when you press it, it basically tells this app that it doesn't require an Apple ID to be installed. If you don't click this button and you assign this app and it pushes over to the device, what's going to happen is that iPad is going to scream saying you need to sign in with an Apple ID to get this app. So for every app, we need to press that button, make sure it is pressed. Once you press it once and you acknowledge the OK button afterwards, it will not prompt you again. So I'm going to leave this one here just so for future demonstrations, because we like to show people that that button exists and it does need to be pressed for the first time when you're looking at an app. Very important, but enable device-based assignment. But once you do click it, I'm going to go back to my previous app here. We're going to wonder for dash for dots, and again, to assign the app, we click the Edit Assignment button over here in the right-hand corner. This is what it'll look like after you've pressed that button. And if you see this message and no button, you know that this app is ready to go. It's not going to give you any problems regarding, needing an Apple ID. Sorry, I see that this one still has an assignment on it. I've removed that. But when you get in here, this is what it's going to look like after you've pressed the button, of course. We now need to assign this app to a smart group. And we created that smart group earlier, which contains the iPad that I have here. And how we do that is we actually hover over Add Assignment By, and then a little menu appears right below it, License Codes by Smart Group. When we click that, this little box is going to pop up here. And this is where we're going to select our smart group. When I put my mouse inside there, it's going to give me a drop down of all my smart groups that are available. In this case, I created the Library iPads one, and this is the one I'm going to select. Now, by default, it should populate the number of devices that are included in this group, as seen over here. So I only have one device in there, one iPad, and it's reflected right here. But before we push it to this app, it isn't very important that we allocate a certain number of licenses to this smart group. And essentially what that means is how many licenses are going to be available to this smart group. So for example, if I were to put allocated as 1, and then I were to save it, and then I were to push the app over to the device, and that was that, and then down the road I get a new Library iPad, and then I come in here and I add it into my smart group, it will not get this app. And the reason is because I only allocated 1 license, whereas at that point I would have 2 devices, but only 1 allocated license available for it. So what we've done, especially with free apps, is we've actually included a pretty high number of licenses. So in this case, this free app has 500 licenses. So you can actually be pretty liberal with how many you have allocated here. So you might want to accommodate your app assignment for any future growth. In this case, if I intend that maybe down the road I'm going to get 20 more iPads for the library, I can go ahead and put 21 as my allocated licenses. And there's nothing wrong with that because I have 500 to work with. And now I can see I've allocated 21 and I still have 479 left over. And I don't believe you'll ever actually exceed the 500, and if you did, we could easily adjust that. But for now, just with the way the AirWatch works, we have to give even free apps a sort of license count, and we put 500 for the free ones. This may not apply in the case of a paid app where you actually only have a certain set of licenses. So some paid apps, you'll only have 20 licenses available or something to that effect. In that case, you wouldn't want to overcompensate because you want to make sure each license goes to a specific iPad. So just keep that in mind when you're signing apps. You want to make sure whether is it a free app, and if it's free, I can probably tell by the 500 licenses there. And if it's not free, I need to account every device for that I am allocating. But I have chosen that the smart group that this applies to is the Library iPads. It's got 1 device in it. I've given 21 licenses available for the group. And that is so that in the future, if I add any more, I will have licenses available for it. And all I'll have to do is add it to the smart group. I won't have to come back in here and change any of the licensing information. There's a few more things we need to set before we click Save, and that is the assignment type. Right now it is set to auto. There are two options, auto and on demand. Auto means the second I hit save, it's going to push this app down to the iPad right away. On demand will put it in the catalog. I think I briefly showed you the catalog before. Let me just dive back to the iPad here, and I'll show you what I mean by the catalog. Bear with me a moment. So here's my iPad. If I click auto, what will happen is that the app will push right away, or I guess I should say right away in air quotes, because it really all depends on the network speed of your school or your location. But if I were to set it to on demand, what that means is it's not forcing the app to go to the iPad, but rather it's going to put it in the catalog over here on the left-hand side. And what this catalog is, it's essentially just a web page, and it'll show you all the apps that are available to that are available through AirWatch. I can see that there's two that are already installed, the Agent and Google Drive. If I chose as on demand, what it would do is put this app in the AirWatch catalog, and instead of showing installed, it'll show install. So it's an optional app. It's not forced. It's available for downloading in the catalog, but by all means, it does not push down to the device right away. So if that's what you're looking to do, and I think most users probably are looking to actually have the app push down right away, and they want to set the apps that they want for their iPads, you're going to want to leave it as auto. And then there's remove on unenroll. You want to leave that checked, and basically if you ever unenroll the device, the app will be removed with it. But you don't have to worry about that because you can't unenroll the device technically. And make app MDM managed if user installed. Leave that checked. Do not uncheck that. That field essentially gives AirWatch the power to manage that app. So that's all you really need to be mindful of is you choose your group, allocate your licenses, set how you want it to deploy the device, either auto or on demand, and then we click save. And what should happen is the app should actually make its way over to the device. Now again, this could take some time depending on the network speed. Sometimes it comes in right away, sometimes it doesn't. It kind of goes on like a first come, first serve basis with AirWatch. I'm not going to stay here on the iPad screen and wait for it to come in, but if I do see it on the iPad carrying on with this webinar, I'll jump back to the iPad and I'll show you. But that is the demonstration of how to add an app. Again, you find your app, click the edit assignment, give it a smart group. Choose your smart group from the list, allocate your licenses, set the deployment type, auto or on demand, and then click save. And what it'll do is it'll push that app to your iPads that all belong to that smart group. We can do the same thing for web clips, and web clips again up here at the top next to purchase. And as I said earlier, web clips are basically just a shortcut that appear to look sort of like an app, and we're going to go ahead and add one in. So to add a web clip, we're going to click add application right here. And it's going to have our organization group ID. Just leave that as is. And for platform, we're going to choose Apple iOS because we're only working with iPads. Then we hit continue. And now we need to give a name for our web clip. So for example, if I wanted to provide a shortcut to ServiceIT, I would maybe call it ServiceIT. Provide the URL. You can copy and paste it from your browser, or if you know it off by heart, you can just type it in here. Description is optional, doesn't really have any effect, so I'm going to leave that blank, but you want to have your name and your URL. Then we want to give the web clip an icon, and this is this is how it's going to look on the iPad itself. So we're going to see the actual icon appearing as what we put in here. So I can actually choose an image from my desktop to set as the icon. I actually already have an icon that I want for my ServiceIT on my desktop, so I'm just going to quickly grab that, and there it is, ServiceIT. I hit open, it uploads my image to AirWatch, and we're not done here. Now we need to assign this web clip to that smart group. So we switch over to the assignment tab up here at the top, and for assigned groups, we're going to click in here. And just like how we were before when we were assigning an app, it brings up a list of our smart groups. The one that we've been working with is Library iPads. I'm going to choose that one. Of course, if I wanted to, I could actually select more. As you can see, whenever I click in here, it brings up the list again, and I can choose multiple. But for now, I'm just going to use, for the sake of the demo, just a library iPads smart group that I created. We're going to set exclusions to no, or leave it as no rather. Push mode, going back to what I said earlier, there's on demand and auto. For auto, it'll push right away. On demand, you'll see it in the catalog. In this case, we probably want auto. We don't want this to be optional. We want it to make its way to the device. And on top of that, we can also make it removable. If you don't want it to be removed, so you know, on the iPad when you press and hold the buttons and they all start shaking and then you can click the X to remove it, we can set that as no, so that way the web clip can't be removed by the user. Or you can set it to yes if you don't mind them removing it, but you can set that flag here. And full screen, just leave it as no. You probably don't want it to open the entire screen, you just want it in the browser. So with that, if we click save and publish, that web clip, oh sorry, there's one more step here. It just sort of reiterates how this is going to be assigned. So it shows that for my iPad number 2, cart 1, that's going to get this web clip. I click publish down here, and I can see my web clip now appears here. And if I go over to my iPad, let's see, hopefully I got it by now. Just going to quickly open that up. And it looks like it actually got the web clip before the app. So you can see on this web clip right here, that's the web clip that I just created. And if I click that web clip, it'll actually open up Safari and take me to ServiceIT. In this case, it's asking me to log in because obviously I need to log in before I can get to ServiceIT. But that's the idea of the web clip and deploying an app. So with that, now we know how to add an app, we know how to add a web clip, but how do we remove an app? So it's much like the same way that we add an app, we can actually remove it the same way as well. And how we do that is we go back into our purchase tab here. We're going to search for our apps again. We do that by typing in our school name right over here in the search bar. Hit enter. It's going to show us a list of all our apps. And let's say we no longer have a need for Wonder for Dash and Dot robots. We added it in, and now we want to get rid of it. So, much like before, we go into Edit Assignment. We find out which smart group currently has this, and I can see here my library iPads group does. And I no longer have a need for this app on my library iPads, and I want to remove it. So rather than going up to each one and removing the app, I can actually just do it right from here. And I do that by clicking this blue X over here. And by clicking that blue X, what that'll do is it removes the assignment of this app to my smart group. So that once I hit save, it's actually going to remove the app from the iPad. And that'll actually take effect to however many iPads you have in a smart group. So we showed that, and at this point I'd like to go back to the presentation here. And of course, if you have any require any support, you can visit our webpage on ServiceIT, or you can always contact us at 416-395-4357. We are option 5. On the ServiceIT webpage, everything that I've done here today is actually in the documentation as well. And you can get to the ServiceIT webpage through TDSB Web. You can use the services drop-down menu here and sort it alphabetically. So ServiceIT is near the bottom there. Or also at the bottom of the page, there's also the ServiceIT banner. You can click that as well, and that'll take you to ServiceIT. And that has all our documentation for this webinar and everything that we've performed here in the webinar. And with that, I will segue over to, does anyone have any questions? Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of radio silence in the chat, so I'm going to assume that there are no questions. Of course, if you do have any questions, as I stated earlier, please feel free to contact us at 416-395-HELP or 4357 option 5, and we'll be able to walk you through it over the phone. Once again, thank you very much for attending this webinar. I really appreciate it. It's something new for us, and we're kind of working through it as we go along. If you have any feedback, you will be receiving a feedback form at the end of this, and just let us know how we did, anything we can do to improve it. But once again, thank you very much for attending this webinar, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care. Bye-bye.